Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we ended talking about the younger widows, which is kind of an interesting conversation, and we talked about the pledge, so we're going to go from here to the end of the chapter. These last two verses I was reading, they're very interesting to me. It says, "Remember the sins of some people are obvious, leading them to certain judgment, but there are others whose sins will not be revealed until later. In the same way, the good deeds of some people are obvious, and the good deeds done in secret will someday come to light." All right, so what action can we take in regard to verse 24? What kind of action could we take? The sins of talking about these sinners, some not so obvious and some that seem to be very obvious.
The trap everyone falls into is I can get away with it. No one's going to find out.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, kind of the thought that came to my mind is the first thing is we can address those sins as Scripture tells us to.
Okay.
Lovingly approach them, but the kind of the other thought that ran through my mind is I remember being a kid and being into mischief and thinking I was getting away with it, and everybody knew, except I didn't know they knew. And then my kids were the same way. They did things, and I was aware. And I think that does go on as we get more mature. We see younger people doing things, and they think they're getting away with it. We know, but we also are aware they're going to have to work through some things. And if you push too hard, they're just going to rebel and make a big deal about it. But it's just like here, it is difficult sometimes to know what to do. And it doesn't tell us if those people are intentionally sinning or if they are mistakenly doing things incorrectly. That is a sin. And Paul talks about other places, there are sins that lead to death and sins that don't. And, there are all those things. But the biggest thing is for us to be aware of that for ourselves.
Okay.
It's very unlikely that people are not aware of our weaknesses, especially our family. They know. So it's good to be able to just go, oh yeah, accept that confrontation, I guess you'd say, and be willing to go with those judgments of other people when they see it, and accept that, oh, well, maybe what I'm doing is sinful, and then fix it.
Okay. I'm going to jump to John, then I'm going to come back to you and ask you another question. John?
So we got to read this passage and see what the root of the problem is here. Some are hidden, some aren't. And the question is, what actions can we take with it? Well, with two perspectives, you can read this passage. You can read it as I'm observing somebody in their behavior, or I'm participating in life with them, and I observe it while I'm working with them, while I'm living, while they have them over the house, whatever it is. You can't know the true person unless you get to know them, which is working beside them at church, or helping them with something that they're dealing with in their house or their family, or inviting them over for dinner. I think the number one action we need to take is get involved with people.
Okay. You kind of answered a little bit where I was going, but
Well, that's kind of the direction that I was looking at it. Those sins are obvious, and then there's those that aren't. Well, the point is, everyone sins. So don't be judging good and bad. That's not our job. Don't get carried away judging people because you see them sinning, because other people are, you just don't know.
So those others that you don't know do you feel like they're intentionally trying to hide it, and that's why it won't be revealed, or they're just kind of doing their thing and no one is noticing? Because this is kind of where I was going to go with what Chuck said. Is it more difficult today in our church environment to find those people who are in this sin than it was back then? So go ahead and finish with what you...
Me?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say.
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, it depends on the sin. Robbing banks is pretty obvious. You know, things you're doing in the privacy of your home or backyard or driving down the street maybe aren't so obvious. And certainly maybe not to people. If you're not around them, you don't see what they're doing. Kind of like John said, if you want to get involved with people, you need to get involved with them. And then maybe you can help them if you see sins that you can help them.
Okay, John?
I mean, you see over and over with the little churches that are addressed in the New Testament, that there was not much that was hidden. If somebody was sitting in the church, everybody knew it. And I think it's because the participation level was a lot greater back then. There was no pew warmers back then. I mean, I guess you could technically go to a service and sit and watch, but it was more participatory is a word I can use there, but it was more interactive. You were expected in some way to be part of the body and be functioning. When that's happening, it's really hard to hide what's going on in your life. Now that's different than what we have now, which is basically a consumer model. Everyone comes in, they shop for a church, this fits my style, okay, I feel comfortable here, but don't ask me to do anything. That's not how it was back then. So it's a lot easier to hide in that than it is when you're working in the field next to somebody, or when you're doing some benevolence that actually matters to a community. That's harder to hide.
Yeah, and you know me, that almost all roads lead to relationship. And that's kind of why what I was asking a little bit earlier, that because it seems to me that relationship impacts our involvement, our ability to poke our nose in or step in when we find out our brother is sinning. Do you agree? More difficult now than it was then? I mean, I'm right with you, John. What does God see? In this passage, what does God see?
I think more like, yeah, he sees everything, but also like he sees the people who are sinning openly and the people who are sinning but trying to get away without being caught.
Okay. What about verse 25? Yeah?
He's noting that there's a lot of activity going on. And he's really calling the person that reads this passage to be observant, to think about how they're going to approach situations. I mean, there's a lot to read into that, so maybe I'm going the wrong direction, but if I was to look at that and I would say, there's a lot going on here. I want you to be sensitive to the good and the bad and be willing to work with either.
Okay. So when he says, oh, sorry, Terry, go ahead.
I mean, if they're causing shame on the church, you might want to do something, but I don't know that we do anything. I don't think I'm supposed to go around judging people's sins and going up to them and saying, I see you're sinning again today. Let me help you. That puts you in the hypocritical position because you're a sinner too.
Yeah. I kind of came to the landing spot that Chuck did, which is, we can try to help them if it's something that they're, that they're struggling with. But you're right. There's a fine line between the log in our eye and the desire to return a Christian brother or at least help them deal with that sin, because sometimes there's not anything we can do, and sometimes there may be some way that we can help them. Did I see another hand? Oh, I've got two, Chuck and then John.
Well, the thing I was gonna mention, it doesn't really go into it here, but from my experience, the folks that are most difficult to try to work with are in self-denial. They refuse to believe that they're wrong, or even entertain the possibility. And I don't know what to do with people like that. I typically just pass that off to someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, John.
You know, so I heard our ability to judge others. I don't see this passage as that. I think that the approachability of people depends upon the maturity of the culture that they're in. A church that is safe means that the person coming to you is open about what they're going through all the time. You know that person is wide open to the rest of the congregation. They're always looking for self-improvement. They're someone that you can trust because they're not hiding anything. If that person comes to you, you're like, yeah, I am struggling with something. Thank you for asking. Because you trust them. If you're in a group that is very judgmental, very protective of their own privacy, doesn't really talk to each other, and is always gossiping, there is no way you're going to be able to do that. So those are two different paradigms. One is I'm interested in the person and I want them to make it to heaven. The other one is you're disturbing my church and I'm going to fix this issue. We both know we've been in churches like both of those. And one of those is an open dialogue with somebody that is willing to say, yeah, I need help with this. The other one, you'll never get that chance.
See, and that's kind of what I wondered the most when I was thinking about this passage is how many people are willfully sinning and how many people are looking for help, but they're not able to find it from their brethren. I don't have an answer. That's kind of that was my pondering on this, because it may be 50-50 or it may be 90, I don't want you to bother me, and 10 the other way. I just wonder if there's something, I take this church because this is my church, is there something that we can be doing as a body to make that available for those who really are fighting that and need support from that? That's kind of what I was thinking about. And 25, it says, the good deeds of some people are obvious. All right, so you think that he means that in a good way, or you mean they're doing it because they want all of the, thank yous and great job and, all that stuff? You see a tone one way or the other? Yeah.
I would say no. I mean, Jesus called people hypocrites, but he doesn't call them hypocrites here. He just says some good deeds are obvious. It's more the latter that I need to be careful myself, where I can be judgmental in this is, why is that person not participating? Why is this person not here? When maybe they're doing something good deed in secret that I just don't see. I'm being judgmental when I shouldn't be, that they're doing something I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he's talking here about these are people showing off what they're doing.
that's what I was kind of wondering. But yeah, I mean, there's people who work on the building. There's people who do the communion trays, put the coffee out. I mean, all these little things that I couldn't tell you who does it, but someone is doing it. And I like it when Paul says that they're done in secret, will someday come to light. It's almost like they don't want anyone to know that they're the ones doing it. They'd rather just remain in that anonymity and keep their head down and do what they're able to do to serve. So I really liked the way he put it, and I thought that was interesting, that the good deeds are done in secret. Yeah.
I had a hard lesson in this when I was first converted. A little church in New England, and the biggest problem with little churches is the lawn never stops growing. So you buy a lawnmower, and you can't get anyone to mow it. So I decided that this was gonna be my hill to die on, and I was gonna mow the lawn in the summer, and I'm out there grumbling, and my wife comes to pick me up, and I'm grumbling, and she says, well, who are you mowing the lawn for? Stopped me dead in my tracks. I'm like, I'm not mowing it for recognition, I'm mowing it because it needs to be done for the Lord. Changed my whole perspective on a lot of things.
Remind me to find you after. I have a funny lawn mowing story about the Mesa Church here, so we'll have to talk about that. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think I've talked to that to death. Anyone else have any before I move on? Okay. All right, we're going to start in 6. It's a pretty big change in direction for Paul. As soon as my screen changes. Okay, I'm going to start reading the verse, and hopefully the screen will catch up. It says, all slaves should show full respect for their masters, so they will not bring shame on the name of God and his teaching. If the masters are believers, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. Those slaves should work all the harder because their efforts are helping other believers who are well loved. Teach these things, Timothy, and encourage everyone to obey them. Some people may contradict our teaching, but these are the wholesome teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. These teachings promote a godly life. Anyone who teaches something different is arrogant and lacks understanding. Such a person has an unhealthy desire to quibble over the meaning of words. This stirs up arguments ending in jealousy, division, slander, and evil suspicions. These people always cause trouble. Their minds are corrupt, and they have turned their backs on the truth. To them, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Okay. I wonder if I lost connection. All right, there we go. Okay, so I know you only got to hear it instead of reading it, but we're going to focus on this first part. Is there any difference in the service the slave should give between a Christian master and a heathen master? Okay. It doesn't really talk much about, or talk about the heathen masters here. He talks about the ones that are believers. So why or why not? If you said no, he shouldn't, why don't you think he should?
Well, I think that the reason that you treat it's almost like whenever, in the Jewish days, the Romans required, if you owned a piece of land and the guy was carrying a burden, you had to help him carry it to the other end of your land. But then Jesus was saying, I tell you, take it past the next guy's land,
Okay.
In other words, even though these aren't believers or whatever, you go the extra mile so that, people will know that you're serving me, basically. And so I think when we go the extra, I think that no matter which, whether believer or non-believer, I think we should go the extra mile to do the right thing. But I think we'll be counted more whenever we're helping other believers.
Okay? John?
So there's two things going on here. One is you're exemplifying Christ in your service. The other is you're rendering honor, whether it's worthy or not, to that person. So we're creating a dialogue here in this passage. One is rendering honor to those that are over you, when you're really rendering honor to God. And in that rendering you're doing, you are exemplifying what Christianity is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is the reciprocal relationship, which we'll get to in a second, and I won't jump the shark there, but I think that's what the two pieces are that I see in this first part.
Yeah, I thought it should be opposite. When I read it, I said, it seems like the impact would be greater for a Christian slave serving a heathen master and doing it willingly and doing it to the best of his ability. I was thinking that, to me, would have a bigger impact than working for a master who is already a Christian. But if you have a Christian slave, though, I could see where the Christian slave is kind of thinking the other way, is that this guy, my master's a heathen. He's going to hell. He doesn't matter. I'm just going to, do my thing, and so he doesn't, he doesn't count because he's a heathen anyway. So I kind of thought about it like that. As you mentioned, the big advantage is that that there is a potential to show that to not only the non-believing master, but also the other slaves who are there too, because I'm sure that's something that would get noticed for someone who's wealthy and has multiple slaves. And why is he all of a sudden working so hard? What is he trying to, what is he trying to get at? And they're going to ask, why are you doing this? So,
Andrew, can I say something?
oh, go ahead.
So in that verse 2, it was really addressing being a slave to a fellow believer. And I think if you think about our interactions with one another, whether biologically familial or Christian familial, we tend to have familiarity breeds contempt.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, oh, well, this person is my family, so they have to extend grace, so I can be disrespectful, because it's saying there, it's no excuse for being disrespectful. Well, that has to be addressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there this characteristic of disrespect even being addressed? Is it possible that they were being disrespectful because you have grace, so you got to put up with me because we're believers, we're all going to the same place, so you got to, and so then you don't step up and serve. And I think that's really speaking to a heart issue. So when the encouragement is work harder in helping other believers who are well loved, it's a heart issue, and it's a love issue, and it's a display of love. And so because we often take each other for granted, then we can step very easily into being disrespectful instead of honoring the love that you have in working with a fellow believer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't go there, but I think you're exactly right. My assumption is there's a problem there, and so Paul is trying to address that and tell them that they need to be doing the best that they can.
Yeah, I go right along with that, but remember, we're in a striated culture, right? There's still slavery, people being converted in the middle of their lives. They go to worship together. We have a situation somewhere else in the Bible where they're trying to find out where everyone sits because of ranking, and Paul's like, knock that off. So we go where everyone's in brotherly love, and they're calling each other Bob and Joe and whatever. Then they go home, and Bob and Joe go back into society where culture and norm are still present. It would be quasi-disrespectful for Bob to go to Joe and say, I need you to bring in the 3 pots of wine for the party tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at him and goes, yeah, okay, I'll get to it in a minute, Joe. If someone from the outside saw that, that's that disrespects the culture and the norms. So in the service to the master, who is your brother, you're living a dual role, and you're preserving a cultural integrity there, so that the message can still get out without causing massive ripples in a culture that's not ready to receive a break from slavery yet.
Okay. Okay. So when I read this passage, I immediately thought of Philemon, the letter to Philemon. There was an estimated 60 million slaves in the Roman Empire. When I saw that number, that floored me. 60 million slaves in the Roman Empire. And the fear of rebellion was always high. So slaves being respectful to their master was a very high priority because they weren't going to allow any dissension at all. Slaves could be branded if they tried to run away with an F, fugitivo, or runaway. They could be beaten, sent to labor camps, or killed if the master decided with impunity. The slaves have no rights, and I think that's interesting. And James talks a little bit about that too. It's hard to imagine someone having that much power over you, and then you go to worship and you're sitting side by side and acting like nothing's happened. That's got to be a little mind-blowing to a slave who, he's always in slave mode. Yeah.
In the United States here, especially in Mesa, we don't have a class society. We don't have a certain place that certain people are supposed to sit and worship service. I have been to Ghana a number of times, and they have tribal systems still over there. It doesn't do the government, but people talk about royalty, and they give honor to those of royalty, and they have to be, since some of the royalty are Christians, it's interesting in a congregational situation how everybody tends to be equal, even though when they walk out of the building, they are not. I've observed that personally.
Mm-hmm.
There are places in the world that class society is still a very big deal. And we are not around that here. We have more people who are famous. We give those people that have notoriety, we give them more attention than we do like classes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So let's read through this real quick. I'm writing to Philemon, and I kind of skipped just to hit the main parts of this letter. I'm writing to Philemon, our beloved co-worker. I'm praying that you will put into action the generosity that comes from your faith as you understand and experience all the good things we have in Christ. That is why I am boldly asking a favor of you. I could demand it in the name of Christ because it is the right thing for you to do. I appeal to you to show kindness to my child, Onesimus. I became his father in the faith while here in prison. Onesimus hasn't been of much use to you in the past, but now he is very useful to both of us. I wanted you to help because you were willing, not because you were forced. It seems you lost Onesimus for a little while so that you could have him back forever. He is no longer like a slave to you. He is more than a slave, for he is a beloved brother. If he has wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge it to me. So in verse 8, a couple of things that I thought were interesting. Rather than appearing to agree that what Onesimus did was okay, he asks, sort of, Philemon to show kindness to Onesimus, and then. The funny thing is, later in verse 18, I'm one clue ahead. In verse 18, he says, if he has wronged you any way or owes you anything, charge it to me. Kind of gave you the idea that he might have stolen things from Philemon or something like that. So in verse 10, it says, I appeal to you to show kindness to my child, Onesimus. I became his father in the faith. So implication there that maybe Onesimus and Paul met somehow, and Paul brought him to Christianity. I may be just reading into that, but that's kind of the way the phrase was. That's kind of what I took out of it. The funny thing is, in verse 11, he says, Onesimus hasn't been of much use to you. It seems like kind of a pun because Onesimus in Greek is profitable. So I thought that was kind of funny when I read that. Paul uses this interesting phrase in verse 15. It says, it seems you lost Onesimus for a little while so that you could have him back forever. What do you think Paul meant by that? Eternity, that's kind of what I would have got out. Any other views on that? Yeah, I think that he's saying that that Onesimus now shares in the salvation that Philemon has. And Paul continues that thought of salvation by calling Onesimus a beloved brother. But this is the comment I was going to make earlier. Paul's very passive-aggressive. I didn't put it up here. But in verse 19, he says, and I won't mention that you owe me your very soul. So he keeps prodding him a little bit, saying, I'm asking you to do this. This is the right thing to do. You can do this, but you really better do this. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, so we talked a little bit about the service of a non-Christian master. How is that different? Well, we kind of hit this either. I was going to ask how is that different from a Christian master, but I think we kind of talked about that a little bit, so I'm going to go past that. What does this passage say about how we as Christians should carry out our profession? Everyone's retired.
Right. Kind of the opposite response as Dan, but I totally get your point of why he's addressing this. But this is, my boss is not a Christian, my boss's boss is not a Christian, so on and so forth. So I have these either less passionate or even these questions of, okay, am I really doing the right thing here? Is the company really doing the right thing morally? Versus work all the harder for helping the believers. Like, okay, if I was working for another Christian, we've got the same values. That's much more inspiring, easier for me versus, I'm going to be kind of begrudging of, or even question, my boss doesn't really agree with me on these things. Versus, but, okay, show full respect, I need to be responsible in that, regardless of that, even if we're not aligned spiritually.
How is that now? Some of you are about the same age as I am. I've been working, 46 years. How are corporate environments different now than they were even 20 years ago? Okay, it's very difficult. It's very difficult as a Christian you really have to guard what you say when you're talking to someone else, because you can offend them just by making a comment about going to church, and be accused of something that you really weren't even a part of. You were just kind of making I'm going to church on Sunday, but it's much more difficult today in a corporate environment to do your profession as a Christian. I don't have the answers. It's tough for me sometimes. What is it? You look at this scripture And if I am considering my boss or my company, the master, as an employee, I have to comply with the rules. I have to be respectful of others. And then at the same time, I have to balance what I do and what I say, because I don't want to disrespect God, show disrespect for God by not saying something. It's a really tough balancing act. Yeah, shaking your head.
I've seen a difference, I'm a bit younger, but even the shorter time I've been there, I've seen a difference in my company over the past almost 20 years now. Yeah, it wasn't the same. Things didn't change for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, when I was even in my 20s and 30s, it didn't matter what you talked about pretty much at work. No one cared, really.
Well, it's also different from the standpoint of who the employees are. There seems to be an enlightenment through the school systems and college and whatnot, what's right and what's wrong and what you should and shouldn't be trying to tell people to do. And so they're all full of these rights.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is they think they can act and do anything they want. And when you try to correct them on some of that, sometimes they're not receptive to it, whether it's company policy or not. Sometimes it's as simple as language. It's like, how is this acceptable? That sort of thing. And I have addressed it, and the perspective was, this is a big company, and there's lots of places you could go. You don't know where you might end up working in a place like this. But I can tell you that language will be have a negative impact on your future.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that under control.
Yeah.
There's things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole thing was, it offended me. It's like, this is not okay, but I didn't approach it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I said, I don't know what is the right way to deal with that. I try to show respect to everyone, but that's what I always did. That's how I was taught. So that doesn't really differentiate me as a Christian from someone else. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you want to be a representative, you have to look for ways to be that in today's professional environment. And here, in their environment, it was very simple. We had a master and we had a slave. And the slave did what they were told, and that's it. Then you start mixing up that society by having masters and slaves both become Christians, and then they're together, and so I'm sure that they were getting it from outside too. Why are you dealing with your slave in this way? Well, I became a Christian, and I don't, it really kind of threw things on its head. And I kind of think that our society right now, obviously not nearly as severe as a master and slave relationship, but I mean, in how we have to deal with people is very difficult. Okay, so if you look in verse 2, it says, are the things Paul refers to in verse 2 the same things we just discussed, B, related to slaves, or C, something else? So verse 2, if the masters are believers, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. Those slaves should work all the harder because their efforts are helping other believers who are well loved. Teach these things, Timothy, and encourage everyone to obey them. All right, so are those things the same as what we just discussed? Are they related to, is that related to slaves, or is it something else? What is Paul trying to say there? What are these things? He says, teach these things. what is it that he's wanting Timothy to teach them?
To live and serve at a higher standard with a loving heart.
Okay, that's definitely one of them.
Respect for those over you and honor for those, just human dignity being restored for those that are serving. So he's
Okay.
taking those two principles and he's applying them generally to the rest of the Christian church, saying, I want all of you to exhibit this behavior. Because how we treat each other is going to matter.
I love the way you phrase that, because you have someone who has all the power and their dignity shown both ways. That would be something I think that Timothy would kind of put at the top of the list for a congregation that's kind of struggling to find themselves as they're, being brought together as new Christians. What else?
Here, this is just verse 1 and 2.5 here. The verses were added later, hundreds of years later. I have a different translation where there's a paragraph right here.
It's not in there.
And I personally think that fits better. This is the end of the letter. He's told all these things that we've broken up into 5 and slightly 6 chapters. Now it's teach these things. What you do to the elders, how you manage the widows, slaves and masters, all these things. Okay, in summary, Timothy, these are things that Christians should be doing now. I think this is more of a broader summary of the whole letter, not just slaves and masters.
Yeah, that's a great point. I looked in probably 4 or 5 different versions. This phrase right here is not in many of them. Teach these things, Timothy, and encourage everyone to obey them. Was not in at least several versions that I looked at. I looked at ESV, NLT, King James, and Revised Standard, I think, if I remember right. So I thought that was really interesting that was in there in this one. Okay, so a little bit further down it talks about wealth. How would these people become wealthy by showing godliness? Down here, to them, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. How would these people become wealthy by showing godliness?
I think of a man I met many, many years ago who was a deacon in the church, and he made it pretty clear he was as involved and connected as he was because he was able to sell a lot of insurance to members of the church.
Okay.
And that's always been kind of like the Mr. Poster Child for this verse. And it's not to say he wasn't sincere, but
Mhm.
he saw his connections as a way to do more business.
Do you mind if I tell that story?
Oh,
No, I'm asking my wife if she minds if I tell that story. You know what I'm going to talk about, right?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
I do.
Okay.
I was just gonna say too, this is the version of LinkedIn before LinkedIn was a term. This is networking
Yeah.
before networking was a term.
So Anne teaches ladies classes, and one of the classes that she taught several years ago, she has a pretty strict rule. We don't talk about personal businesses in our class. So two people, I think, were...
The other was just an innocent bystander who experienced the fallout.
Okay, so they were one of the people that was in there, it seemed like she wanted to be involved in that class because she had this new multi-level marketing thing that she had gotten involved with, kind of like for people who have been around a while, Amway, that kind of thing. So so she would come in and they would be, kind of pushing this she wanted to get the contacts, and so just in her sweet way, she just said, look, we don't talk about that in here. That's not what we're here for. We're here to study. But that's kind of similar to what you're saying. There are people who are Christians, just like there are people who are non-Christians who look at a group of people as a way to sell whatever it is I'm selling. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless you're using it for personal gain as opposed to wealth by helping others. So.
I actually had a gal tell me one time a separate, I thought you were going to tell this one about a gal who had said, the only reason I go to Bible study is so I can meet people to add to my group.
I had forgotten about that one.
I quit inviting her to Bible study.
Yeah, Kevin.
I was gonna
I'm
say
sorry.
that,
Thank you for letting me tell it.
know people that were in business for themselves, and they were just good people. And it's like you walk into businesses today, and it's hard to get anybody to even acknowledge you or say hi or thank you or anything. And so when you run into somebody that's just really kind and good and more than willing to help you, you take notice. So I think that a person that treats everybody fairly and in a loving way, I think that their business is going to grow exponentially just because of their great attitude. And people recognize that, hey, this guy, I love doing business with this guy. So if I get a choice to go to place B where they ignore me, or place A where they treat me good, I'm going to A.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think you can go either way. Obviously, there's always going to be people that are just about the money. But there's also people that are, instead of the money, they are more about serving God in their lives, and they become wealthy because of that. It reminds me of a story I heard about this guy that owned a really big company, and he made a lot of money. And so what he decided one year, he said, okay, I've got all the money I need, so everything I make this year, I'm giving to God. So he took all his money and he gave it to the church. Well, then the next year he made twice as much, so he gave that all to the church. And the third year, in other words, it just kept growing, but I mean, he wasn't doing it to make it for him. He was giving all the money to the church. He said, I have everything I need. And so I think that God rewards people like that set a great Christ-like attitude.
I agree with that. Yeah. Sometimes not the way we expect. I mean, not everyone gets rich, but I mean, they're certainly blessed in many other ways. I think. I think that's always true when you treat people well. So there's a section in here that really talks about people who are contradicting our teaching. These teachings promote a godly life. Anyone who teaches something different is arrogant and lacks understanding. This is actually kind of something interesting that I was reading about. So in those times, they had these scholars, they're sophists, they're professional lecturers is really what they were. And they would go and they would argue a point, and they didn't care which side it was. They were going to argue for the one that's most profitable to them. So they'd travel around and they would gain followings and things like that. But whoever brought the most cheers or adoration, they're kind of the winner, and then they would be adopted by rich or wealthy people who would promote their travels and promote their opportunities to do that. So this one scholar I was reading, he was proposing that these men are the men that Paul's talking about here, and they might see Christianity as a way to profit from that. Because remember, at this time, Christianity is very controversial. It's growing quickly. The government doesn't like it because it causes problems amongst the people. The people who work in Artemis Temple, they're not going to like it because, these people say that that's wrong. You shouldn't be sleeping with someone outside of your wife. Shouldn't go to the prostitutes. So it's really interesting that these guys would go around and do that. We used to have something that was very similar. I talked about a guy, C.R. Nickel. He wrote some books in the 30s and 40s, but what was really interesting is at time they would have a minister or someone with the Church of Christ or a Baptist church or Methodist, and they would get together and they'd have these debates about, oh, this is why we're right and this is why we're right. And that became a really big thing. You would see very large crowds gather for that. But the thing was, and how it relates to this is, they start having these conversations or debates that don't really matter. They're not really about what is the fundamental thing that Paul's talking about in Timothy or in many of his letters, and that is be like God. If you take it down to the most simple level, how are we becoming more Christ-like? How are we forming our life around a relationship with fellow Christians, a relationship with Christ? Because these guys just wanted to make a point. They wanted the adoration for that. Okay, and then okay, just making sure. Then in 6 he says, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. But you, Timothy, are a man of God, so run from all these evil things. Pursue righteousness and a godly life, along with faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness. As he's contrasting all of these things with what he's been talking about just before, about these men who are talking about things arguing about things that don't really matter. Fight the good fight for the true faith. Hold tightly to the eternal life to which God has called you, which you have declared so well before many witnesses. And I charge you before God, who gives life to all, and before Christ Jesus, who gave a good testimony before Pontius Pilate, that you obey this command without wavering. Then no one can find fault with you from now until our Lord Jesus Christ comes again. I really like this. This is very simple advice to Timothy. Run from all these things. Go back to what he said about in this first section. What's wrong with money? There's nothing wrong with money in itself. What happens to, not always, so there's always that caveat. What happens to some people who become wealthy or who have wealth?
You can be consumed by it.
Okay, why? In what way?
Well, in everything. Pretty soon you think that you can do anything you want because you've got all this money. So it can be a power-hungry thing, or it can be, you can think that you can get away with things that you wouldn't have done if you didn't have money. And I think it just opens up all kinds of doors that if you have money, you need to keep from falling in love with it. You know, just keep it in perspective. And I think it's that way with everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can let something take over too much of your life, and it doesn't have to be money. It can be many things. But you want to make sure that the one thing that takes over your life is God.
Okay. In general terms, when you see someone who is wealthy, where do their thoughts start going? How is this wealth accumulated? They're thinking about how their wealth was accumulated. Where do they go with that?
How to get more.
Say that again?
How to get more.
Okay. That's definitely one way.
I did all of this. I'm a self-made person. I earned all of this. This is what I'm due for
Yep.
all the work I put in.
Look at what I've done. Yeah. I worked very hard for this. That's real easy to say. I mean, I'm definitely not wealthy, but, you know, that phrase can escape my mouth with pretty frequent. You know, I work so hard, you know, I got that and I paid for that, and if I think about that, it's like maybe that's why God's not making me wealthy because, you know, look, I'm not wealthy and I'm already having these thoughts. Look what I did. Look how hard I work, you know. So these people who have done these, they have great accomplishments. I mean, you can't take that away from them. But they had many great blessings along the way that I think they failed to see. Yeah.
It's not the things or the money that's the problem.
Not at all.
It's the losing the focus that, where did you get it? It was a blessing from God. I mean, every one of us has the same, should have the same outlook, whether we have a little or we have a lot. Because the previous verse, there it is in 6. You're not taking it with you. So do some good with it and don't let it bury you.
And you've forgotten your first love. You now love money instead of loving Christ, and that's why he's telling you to run from it because, like Kim was saying, your perspective is all perspective, and what's your heart set on?
Yeah.
What's that gonna look like? Especially if you are wealthy and you have people around you telling you how great you are, you know, that kind of idolatrous commotion around you. It's just that dissonance that you have to work past, right? Because really in this room we're all wealthy comparatively with other nations. And you know, even hearing from our family in the Philippines and some of the things that they fight over there, we've had cousins kidnapped so that, you know, that rich auntie of yours in Arizona can pay the kidnapping fee. We've had, you know, I've had an uncle killed because of money. It's just different. And even in a third world environment, you're still gonna have that struggle because we are wealthy here.
All right, I got to finish up. Yeah, I think that it's even more simple than that. You ever seen someone with a hobby that consumes them? I mean, I take the John Wayne view of hunting and fishing. When I want to go hunting and fishing, I go hunting and fishing. You know, but that can be consuming because I love hunting and fishing. So, you know, even something as simple as that can draw your attention. So I think the way that I want to sum this up is very simple. I mean, this is, as I said from the beginning, about relationships. It's these people who are watching out for each other, and they have a lot of great love. I wanted to go into Revelations where it talks about the things that they're not good at, and that's one of them. Christ says, you don't love me like you used to, and you don't love each other like you used to. And so that's kind of where I want to end this. We can all depart from here and you know, forget that we're all brothers and sisters if that's what we choose to do. But that's certainly not where Christ wants us to land. And that's the opportunity that we have. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it.